Welcome to another edition of Global Conversations. My guest tonight, Jeff J. Brown. He's an author, writer, blogger, and video show host, and he shares his views on China, the Chinese people, the Chinese government, and geopolitical issues. After living 10 years and traveling all around Africa, Jeff and his wife decided to move to China, where they spent a total of 16 years living and working among the Chinese people. He's an American from Oklahoma, and he shares his firsthand views on China. Jeff, welcome back to the show.
So good to see you again, Regis. We stay in touch occasionally, but it's nice to see your face, and I always love talking to you because good things come out of it.
I should have had you on here a lot sooner, but things got really intense here in the last few months, and I have a lot of questions to ask you about China, U.S.-China relations, China and Russia relations. So let's get right after it. You had mentioned to me this title, I guess it's a title, China, you said, you wrote The Elephant in the Room. Whoa, what did you mean by that?
The 800-pound gorilla in the room. And it's true, because I think what we are seeing happening in Ukraine is the ultimate goal of Western imperialism, and that's basically NATO, Australia, New Zealand, and the European Union, is to take down China. They can't do that without taking down Russia first, because China and Russia together are unbeatable. And so they're trying to destroy Russia with the eventual goal of destroying China. And or they could try to destroy China first, but they can't do that because the Russians will make sure to help China. So the West has, for me, this is the culmination of 500 years of colonialism, imperialism, global capitalism. It's it has reached a tipping point. They cannot keep up what they're doing. And that's why I think we're in World War III, and China's back there, behind Russia. And thank God they're there, because if they weren't, Russia would be in a real bind right now, in terms of surviving. And they would survive, because look, Stalingrad, World War II, the German invasion. I mean, Stalin, grinding up, millions and millions of Nazis. So the Russians would survive, but the Chinese are there, and they're going to make sure that that Russia will not only just survive, but also thrive.
Yeah, you mentioned something really interesting that doesn't get mentioned enough, that the goal of whoever those people are controlling the United States, the EU, NATO, are trying to take down Russia first, and then take on China. I think that's a really important analysis. I want to ask you some questions, though, about China's development. Everybody knows China economically has just blossomed, and really is, I think, by now surpassed the United States pretty significantly. But the big questions that come out of, not questions, statements that come out of the West, and questions that some of us have, what's the status of the Chinese military? Is it inferior to the United States, to Russia? What about their technology? It's been said that they're many years behind the United States in terms of high-tech warfare and missiles. I see quite the opposite. What is your take on that?
Well, let me just go, China's, you need to know a little bit about Chinese history to really understand the present and the future. Of course, China for years during the Mao era and up into the Deng era had the world's largest standing army, and they had like 4 million, 4 million soldiers. In 1980, 79, 80, Deng reformed the People's Liberation Army, and mind you, he was very powerful in the PLA, but he could not reform it as much as he wanted to. And basically and it became more technologically evolving and less dependent on just ground troops. Of course, don't forget, China has had the atom bomb and intercontinental ballistic missiles since the Mao era. I mean, and satellites and all that. But in any case, from 1980 up until Xi Jinping took control of was elected president and the general party secretary of the Communist Party, it had become, the army had become very, very, very corrupt, really, really corrupt. So Xi, also being a PLA member, and his wife for that matter, he has gone in and done what Deng couldn't do, and he has cleaned up the PLA. And he has completely reorganized it along the lines of the United States, to where they have, regions and missile group, a and a Navy group, and an Air Force group, and a tank. He's organized it. He adopted the American model: quick reaction forces, to go in on short notice. She also realized that China needed to take a quantum leap in technology, and he has done that. And for anybody to tell me, and of course you have to realize that China, the defense industry is 90% state owned. I think that's also true in Russia. And the 10% that are given contracts and stuff, and they're trying to do some private stuff with the private sector, but they are loyal nationalists, patriots, etc. Whereas the U.S., the military budget is not about protecting the United States; it's about making billionaires bigger billionaires. China's technology, which I reported on in military, is, in my opinion, ahead of the United States. They have quantum communication. They have space, they have hyper missiles, they have hyperplanes, they have satellites now. I just read an article where they now have a satellite that can actually get next to like a US satellite and suck all the information out of it. I mean, they are so technologically advanced now, it's not even funny. And no one wants war. But I can guarantee you that if the United States tried to attack China or tried to protect Taiwan, it would not last very long, because first off, the supply line is 9,000 kilometers, and second of all, they would have to bring everything over by ship and plane. For Ukraine, it's more difficult. It's easier for the West because right now they've got the EU border to flood stuff in across the border. But no, the Chinese, they're now down to like a couple of million soldiers. They're lean, they're mean, they're in the South China Sea. They've got bases all over the South China Sea. I wouldn't want to mess with the Chinese military, and America knows that. And that's why they want to get rid of Russia first, in hopes of maybe catching up with Chinese technology in terms of jets. They now have 2 aircraft carriers. A third is going to be launched. They've got a better Navy than the U.S. has. They've got, what can I tell you, Guy? It's game over.
Yeah, that's really mind blowing. Wow, I didn't think they were that advanced. So
It's unbelievable.
that's really incredible news.
I mean, the two best armies in the world are the Russian army and the Chinese army. And I think they, I mean, I wouldn't even want to try to compare them, but that, nobody is going to beat the Russians and nobody is going to beat the Chinese. And nobody especially is going to beat Russia helping China and China helping Russia. It's not going to happen.
Yeah.
Game over.
Yeah. I agree. And I just think it's insane for the United States and NATO. They want NATO now to go into Asia, into the East, and start setting up bases there. But it's absolutely insane that the United States is spreading themselves so thin all over the globe and picking fights. And that's what they're doing, picking a fight with China over Taiwan, continuous threats, the trade wars, and simultaneously with what they've been doing to Russia, for the last 20, 30, 50 years. And I wanted to mention one thing that I read about. The Chinese have a very successful space station. Mm-hmm. And I just read where they're inviting other countries to send their astronauts or cosmonauts, whatever you want to call them, to the
Takenauts.
And I think Russia and the United States, it's going to be the end of the International Space Station. In fact, the United States can't even get people there. They have to blast off from the Russian cosmodrome. So this is all, very encouraging. Not that we're thirsting for a battle, a war between Russia, China, and the United States, but I think it's important for people to know, especially American people, that they're not dealing with midgets. They're dealing with two very powerful countries, well-organized military. Now, I want to shift gears a little bit. I've been talking a lot and trying to convince people about what is really going on in Ukraine. And I describe it as a triple layered event happening. First of all, it is a civil war between West and East. It is a direct conflict between the United States, NATO, and Russia. And I call it a direct it's a hot war.
Oh,
I mean, they're reporting now that basically American and NATO commanders are actually embedded in the Ukrainian military structure, and several are trapped in that Azov-style steel mill in Mariupol, which really proves that this is a direct conflict between the United States and Russia. Mm-hmm. But on another level, Jeff, and I want your comments on this because I think this is what's really going on. I think this conflict in Ukraine is the epic battle for the future order of the planet between the United States unipolar world, where it will control everything, and the Chinese, Russian, and a host of other nations' view of a multipolar world based on the strict observance of international law, based on the UN Charter, the sovereignty and security and development of all nations. These are two conflicting views of how the future order of the world will operate. What are your comments on that? And do you see it happening?
Oh, absolutely. I hate to see people dying and suffering in Ukraine, but of course, Russophones have been dying and suffering for 8 years in the Donbass. It's been genocide there since 2014 with the U.S. CIA color revolution that put in a Nazi government in power in Ukraine. But Ukraine is a tipping point, and this is the beginning of the end of Western Empire. And just like the Roman Empire, just like, you know, every other empire in history, when they've been wounded and they can't expand any further and they can't maintain control, they lash out. And as you said, I mean, in desperation, they just start lashing out. And as you said, you know, the United States is just everywhere, anywhere, everywhere. I mean, they're like in 150 countries. They've got military in like 150 of the 192 countries in the world. So this is a tipping point. For China, it is, you know, and it's not, I mean, I call it the Asian Quad. I mean, we now have the DPRK, the North Korea, which is a very savvy, well-run country in spite of all the propaganda in the West, who now also has hyperglide missiles, and the US doesn't have them, and Europe doesn't have them. The DPRK has, you know, hydrogen bomb, you know, multiple headed hydrogen bombs that could take out the entire east coast of the United States. So the United States and NATO have got to deal with them. Russia and China and DPRK are like brothers. You know, Russia works very closely with DPRK, as does China. Then you have Iran, you know, 80 million people, and they have North Korean missile technology, which is why they are so incredible with their missiles. So the Asian Quad, Iran, Russia, China, and the DPRK, it's like Fortress Asia. They're untouchable. So, you know, what's going to happen is, I think, you know, well, let me get back to China. China is supporting Russia every which way but up. They have to keep talking, the Chinese do, about Donbass, and, you know, negotiations, and that Donbass, should be an integral part of Ukraine, etc. They do that because China has an unfortunate history with the West, in that the West has tried to split off Tibet. The West has tried to split off Xinjiang. The West has tried to split off Hong Kong, Macau, and they still have Taiwan, to deal with. Macau and Hong Kong and Tibet and Xinjiang, it's just like right now, all the West can do is just, stupid propaganda about, 25, millions of Muslims in gulags and stuff in Xinjiang. But Taiwan is still there. So China cannot sit there and say, yes, Donbass should be independent, because then it would come back on them. Well, but what about Taiwan? So they have to play the diplomatic game that Donbass should be an integral part of Ukraine, even though they know it's not going to happen. But they publicly have to state that. And I really want to thank you for bringing up the UN Charter, because if the whole world, honored the UN Charter, we wouldn't have any wars. But it's the West, what I call Euranglo land, NATO, the EU, the Five Eyes, Israel. They don't even recognize the UN Charter. It's for everybody else. And so, yes, it is becoming a multipolar world. It was becoming a multipolar world, especially after Putin came in power in Russia, in 2000. And so it's happening. It is happening. And you're seeing it. India is now basically telling the West to go to hell. We're going to buy Russian oil if we want to. Don't tell us. I even saw the foreign minister said, what do you think we are? You're slaves? You know, I mean, you know, they had a palace coup. The CIA bribed all the people in the Pakistani parliament to kick out Khan, you know, the prime minister, who was very anti-Western. Doesn't matter. China and Pakistan have been working together for 50 years, and they have the China-Pakistan economic corridor that goes all the way down to Gandhar, you know, from Tibet to Gandhar. So it's happening. And in spite of the horrible news coming out of Ukraine and all the terrible things happening there, which is the West's fault, which is the West, this is all on the West's shoulders. It makes me really, really excited, makes me really, really excited, because Ukraine will prove to be in the history books the end of Western Empire.
I agree with you, and I want to continue talking about China's plan for the future. It's not talked about enough, but enough people have heard about it. It's referred to as the New Silk Road, or One Bridge, One Road, the Eurasian landmass, which stretches from the Far East and China all the way to Portugal. And it comes through all these countries that we've been talking about. Their goal has been to create an economic, a developmental, a bimodal corridor using their economic influence and their military might combined with Russia, because Russia is a key player in the evolution of this One Bridge, One Road, or New Silk Road. Your comments on that, Jeff, please.
Yeah, the Belt and Road Initiative is another one of Xi's visionary policies, and it's this idea of using infrastructure to connect the Asian landmass, and not just the Asian landmass, but also into Africa and South America. Chile is a member of the BRI. There are other countries in South America who are members of the BRI. So it's not just the Asian landmass, but the Asian landmass is that gigantic bridge, you know, as you said, connecting the Atlantic to the Pacific. It is incredibly ambitious, and because China is multipolar, is win-win, is for mutual benefit, everybody is enjoying the fruits of it, and China, being an infrastructural juggernaut in terms of being able to build airports, ports, roads, airports, you name it, telecommunications, everything involving infrastructure, even building stadiums, towns, cities. So the Chinese and the Chinese are apolitical, unlike the United States and the IMF and the World Bank, which basically just go in and rape and plunder countries, and then force them to sell off all of their national assets to pay off unpayable debt. The Chinese have low interest rates. They have long-term loans. They have forgiven billions and billions and billions of dollars in loans to the poorest countries in Africa. And so people like to work with the Chinese, and also the Chinese, the United States sends in the CIA, they send in special forces, they conduct color revolutions, they kill people, they blow stuff up as part of their development package. And they basically want to turn every country where they go in and work with, they want to turn them into a vassal whore. China doesn't do that. If you are Eritrea, or you are Angola, or Tunisia, or Bolivia, or Mexico, what your government does is your decision. What your people want is their decision. So more and more people, in spite of all the propaganda, in spite of all the lies, coming out of the big lie propaganda machine from the West, people like to work with China because they're fair, they're reasonable, they think long term, and they don't try to impose their political will on anybody. Because they respect the UN Charter.
So let me jump in here. This news, that you're reporting now, is 180 degrees opposite of what the West projects upon China. And I have to tell you that I have a number of Russian friends, and I know that it's a somewhat common belief in Russia and from the West that China cannot be trusted. There's Russians that say we'd better not trust China because they're going to do to us just what America's trying to do. What do you think about that?
Well, it's not true. The footprint of China in Africa and South America and Oceania and Southeast Asia is so huge and so big, and all the infrastructure projects. They're building a railroad from Kunming in Yunnan. It's already down to Vientiane in Laos. And now they're going to go from Vientiane in Laos all the way down. The goal is to go to Bangkok, and then from Bangkok all the way down to Kuala Lumpur, and then all the way from Kuala Lumpur all the way down to Singapore. That's just one project. There are so many. There's thousands of airports, stadiums, hospitals, schools, roads, bridges, ports, airports, you name it, 5G, everything. That, of course, there are going to be people who are doing these projects. They're not all going to be angels, and there have been some cases where some Chinese contractors and Chinese companies have done stupid things. It's nothing compared to what the West has done for 500 years and continues to do today to the rest of the world. But they'll take a disagreement with a Chinese contractor in Senegal, and they go on strike for whatever reason. And the Western big lie propaganda machine will take that and just blow it up into the biggest fiasco in all of Africa. Unlike the United States, the Chinese government, which I like to wryly call Baba Beijing reacts to these things. They are constantly telling their contractors and their companies and their business. There's 1 million Chinese in Africa, 1 million doing business there, 1 million. So they're constantly through, social media and through consulates and embassies, they are just bombarding all overseas Chinese. You represent the Chinese nation, and you have an obligation to play it straight and to do the right thing. Be Confucian. This is going on all the time, and they contact companies, and as soon as something happens that's not right, they react to it. And so, there's so much going on in China, with China around the world. There's going to be, bad things that happen sometimes. But when you consider the amount of economic activity going on, and the vision that they have, what little happens is just like, compared to the United States, killing millions and NATO killing millions, it's nothing.
Yeah, let's conclude this segment with your comments on the February 4th 5,000 word declaration 2 days after the beginning of the Beijing Olympics between Xi and Putin,
Yeah.
where I thought when I read that it was directed towards the United States of America and basically saying, look, this is where we're going. And it's the kind of world you and I have just been talking about, a multipolar world based on international law, the UN Charter, the rights and sovereignty of all nations, and the development of all nations. Your comments on that statement, and I think that that statement is huge and hasn't been getting enough play.
Well, of course, it hasn't been getting enough play because basically on February 4th, they can't, and I did a real nice article about it, and I even read I actually did an audio visual podcast of the summary that TASS, the Russian news agency, summarized as you said, it's 5,000 words. Basically, it's like, okay, Western imperialism, okay, Western, global capitalism, it's over. We ain't doing that. We're not going to play around anymore. It's over. You are no longer the swinging dick on the world stage, killing millions and invading and conquering and exploiting and occupying and sabotaging. And it's over. It's over. And it's just like, and so when the world's biggest economy, and even the IMF and the World Bank admitted that back in 2014, China's had the biggest economy in the world since 2000, surpassing the United States in 2014, based on purchasing power parities. And of course, you have to use PPP and not exchange rate, because PPP, a pound, a kilo of beef in China has a different price, or an apartment or a car or an orange or a haircut have different prices in China than they do in Switzerland. So if you compare China's economy on a purchasing power parity basis, PPP, China's had the biggest economy since 2014. So here you have the biggest economy in the world, the most, I think, probably at least as powerful military as Russia, technologically just ripping the West a new bunghole. I mean, just their technological development is just soaring. And then holding hands, brothers in arms like this, brothers in arms with Russia, which has an unbeatable military. They have unlimited, you never want to say unlimited, but they've got a lot of resources. And what a lot of people don't realize is that Russia is also very, very technologically advanced. A lot of manufactured stuff goes to the West from Russia. A lot of manufacturing. In fact, even Apple phones have Russian components. So the two biggest behemoths on the world stage, outside of your Anglo land, the genocidal West, including Israel, are just saying it's over. And that's why no one wanted to talk about it, because it is a manifesto to tell the West to go to hell, and we aren't going to put up with it anymore. And it's almost as if by divine right, Ukraine comes along, and what they are proposing in that joint declaration will be proven out with what's happening in Ukraine and across Asia, the Asian Quad, with the DPRK, Russia, China, and Iran, and beyond.
Wow. Great stuff. Great stuff. I'm going to shift directions again. it's been reported that China sent 3 massive cargo planes filled with weapons to Serbia. What is that all about?
Well,
Is that a way to funnel stuff to Russia? Or is it I mean, what's that about?
No, it's just, well, first off, how do they get it from Serbia to Ukraine?
Yeah.
I mean, Serbia is landlocked, and it's just, no, it's just, China, because it, starting in 1921 with the founding of the Communist Party of China, and then Communist Socialist Liberation in 1949, China, and even all the way up until today, had excellent trade, cultural, education, and financial cooperation with Eastern Europe. And that, of course, included Yugoslavia. In fact, a lot of people don't know this, but until what happened, Ukraine was one of China's biggest trading partners, because they were buying a lot of Ukrainian motor parts and manufactured goods, wheat, barley, etc. So they were a huge trading partner with Ukraine, and of course they were with Yugoslavia and Serbia. So they had a contract with a military contract with Serbia to supply, and of course, Serbia is Slavic, and they are Orthodox Christian, and they're very aligned with Russia, and they are the gadfly in Europe. They're having demonstrations supporting Russia.
Yeah.
In Belgrade, they're at football games, they're holding up banners, against the United States and supporting Russia. So China just happened to have a military contract, and so it has nothing to do with Ukraine, and those arms couldn't get anywhere near Ukraine or even Russia or Belarus, or couldn't even get near them. And Serbia needs them. It needs that military hardware.
Yeah, it's got to be a whole bunch of red lights and sirens going off for NATO, to have China come flying in delivering arms to Serbia.
It was an old contract. It was an existing contract.
Well, now, what do you think China will do in terms of the conflict in Ukraine and support of Russia? Will it be anything more than what it is right now, do you think?
No, they're not going to do anything in terms of military. Well, what China is supplying Russia across the Amur River, who knows? Because there's trains and thousands of trains going from China through Russia every year. And there, and so what's going on across the Amur River, I don't know, but it's just like everybody said, the North Koreans are suffering. No one could see what was happening to what was inside all those kilometers and kilometers and kilometers and kilometers of covered train cars going between China and DPRK and Russia. I mean, what is just ridiculous. But anyway, they're not going to get involved in any hostilities, that's for sure. But China is going to make sure that Russia has financial outlets to trade. They're now ruble and yuan trade is increasing dramatically. China is going to let Russia use their CRIFT, to do, banking, etc. China is one. In fact, it was really interesting. Like 2 days after Russia, went into Ukraine, China removed all no one ever heard this, but China removed all import limitations on Russian grain. So they opened the floodgates for Russian, grain. They, of course, they are Russia's, they're not the biggest customer before the loss of the Nord Stream pipeline going into Europe. That China is definitely now Russia's biggest, hydrocarbon importer. China and Russia have a lot of. It's not just natural resources. People underestimate what Russia produces, in terms of manufactured goods and technology and software, and of course all the people, Nokia's left and Ericsson's left, and well, Huawei is going to move in. They're bigger, better, faster, and cheaper than the Western 5G people anyway. So now Huawei is going to completely do 5G for Russia. It's, and then I don't know if you saw it, but I had a deal where I showed, Xi Jinping going like this, and Kim going like this, and Putin going like this when the United States insisted that China, clamp down on the DPRK for their missile tests. Like, yeah, sure. So it's game over. It is game over. And it's just, China is there every which way but up, helping them, although they do have to. And I'll tell you another thing that the Chinese are doing that's been extremely helpful. They have done an incredible job of helping Russia expose all of the bioweapon weapons of mass destruction, WMD bioweapon production by the United States and the West, because you can't just say it's the United States. Britain's involved, and all the Western countries. They just caught Germany. They just caught Germany working in Ukraine in the bioweapon labs. So China's done a great job of helping Russia expose all these horrific crimes against humanity. And so China's taken, propaganda-wise, is helping Russia, financing imports, exports. In the UN Security Council, they're not going to let Russia down. I mean, they will keep anything that the U.S. tries to foist, on the UN Security Council. They will back Russia on any motions or anything, to try to be passed. And they've got the Belt and Road Initiative, trains, planes, technology, manufactured goods, and natural resources. And China is going to make sure that Russia gets all the stuff that maybe the rest of the world doesn't get, like rare minerals. And Russia will make sure that China gets palladium. Anyway, it's an amazing. It's bizarre, but I have never been this. I haven't been this optimistic since Xi got elected.
Geez, you're one of the most optimistic guys I know. Everybody around me and people that are concerned about what's going on in Ukraine are really kind of pessimistic. But this sheds some really good light on what's really happening. Yeah. Now, I want to finish on this note, Jeff, because I think it's critically important, and we need to talk about it a whole lot more and expose it. U.S.-China relations. Now, when Secretary of State Blinky Blinken went to Anchorage and he dressed down his counterpart, it was like a jaw dropper. Are you kidding? And then ever since then, it's gone to hell in a handbasket. What are your comments on U.S.-Russia relations, not just right now, but for the last few decades that you've been following it? how do you see this having evolved?
Well, we could go back to the Sino-Soviet split in 1960, but the China, it's really ironic. China, Mao actually wrote Roosevelt and Truman, saying, let's let's work together. Of course, they wouldn't do it because they wanted to try to they wanted to try to crush. They wanted to try to crush China, which that didn't work out too well. So from the Mao era from 1935 to 1976, Mao stayed loyal to Vietnam. The Vietnam War was very, very anti-Western Empire, anti-American. Although they were starting to quietly starting to do some cooperation after Nixon's visit in '72. There continued to be, basically what happened is China sold the United States a bill of goods. They gave, after Mao died, they gave and Deng gave the Americans the impression that, yeah, we're going to be a good whore for you. We're going to be a member of the Western paradigm, and we're going to be a partner, and we're going to be a good player, and we're going to liberalize and become another Indonesia for you, and get raped and plundered by you. This is what the United States bought into, that Russia was going to be, that China was going to be another good whore like all the other vassals that the United States has around the world. It was lip service. And as a result, China got the better deal out of the United States in terms of technology, trade. America, fast-tracked WTO and fast-tracked, favored nation status, and fast-tracked everything for China, because they're with their hubris, they want to be just like us. Oh, they want to be like Americans. And China took full advantage of it. And of course, being global capitalists and America at the top of the list, they destroyed America's industrial plant, shipped it all over to China, and China became the manufacturing powerhouse of the world. And even at that point, the Americans thought, oh well, they'll just make like rubber ducks, and they'll just make like rubber ducks and little simple things, and we'll do the really serious stuff. Well, that didn't last long either. China's technological advancement, has just been soaring. And it finally occurred, to the United States that they were getting a raw deal. They were basically getting their asses cleaned by the Chinese. And which president was it that finally realized that? Donald Trump. So he was the one that actually finally said, enough of this stuff. They're killing us. They're robbing us blind. And they really were. But Americans were so megalomaniac about how great they were, and how China wanted to be just like them, and everything else. And of course, China played the diplomatic stuff, and they just jawboned. And so finally Trump, said enough of this crap, and that's when he did the tariffs. People out there may not agree with me, but COVID was planted by the United States and China. They tried to destroy China with COVID, WMD bioweapons, avian flu, swine fever, rolling epidemics all over China, wiping out their poultry and pig herds. All of this was done by the United States to try to destroy China, starting in 2017. And that's what, so it's been rough, it's been rough since 2017. And it's just, diplomacy is just the art. It's like kabuki theater, nothing really happens. They just talk and talk and talk and talk and talk and talk. Headlines, the 24-hour news cycle, and the same stuff, different day, just keeps going on. And so, good on China for taking advantage of all of the West's, arrogance and hubris and megalomania and delusions, and the Chinese deserve it, and the West deserves what they got, which was the very, very short end of the stick. So that's where we're at. And now China is technologically, militarily, infrastructurally, and geopolitically, head and shoulders above the West. Game over.
Wow, Jeff, this has been a very enlightening session. I'm very grateful to your insight. Before we go, I want people to know that I mentioned in the beginning you were an author. You've written 3 books. One of them, the Big Red Book on China. It's China's History, Culture, and Revolution. And then you wrote another one called China Rising, Capitalist Roads and Socialist Destinations. And then you had to have a trilogy, 44 Days Backpacking in China. Yeah. I also want people to know, and I'll put links to those in the description to the show, but you also have a YouTube channel, SoundCloud, and a webpage. And I'll put those links in the description as well. I really hope that a lot more people can become familiar with you, get copies of your book, and really find out what's happening in China.